I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We're starting today in Salem because it's the first day, the opening day of the 82nd meeting of the Oregon legislature back there. Over the next 5 months or so, there's going to be hundreds of bills introduced to possibly become new laws. There'll be hundreds of millions of dollars directed to various agencies and purposes in the state. What goes on back there can be fascinating, it can be tension-filled. A lot of times I gotta tell you, it's downright boring from the outside. But what goes on there and what is decided there has the potential to affect every one of our lives. And that's why it's tonight's big story. But before we get too deep into what's happening inside the building, we need to get in there. There's not a lot of parking around the Capitol, so expect to walk a couple of blocks if you come to visit. Photog Scott and I used the back door since the front door to the Capitol is blocked by construction. And then there's the security checkpoint. For generations, the Oregon Capitol was open for anyone to walk in with anything they wanted under their coat, no questions asked. But in these troubled times, it's probably good to have a metal detector. The crew running it was fast and efficient, and it took little time to get through today. Once inside the building, you'll see lots of folks with bright construction vests, and it's common to hear the sound of jackhammers and other power tools. From the side windows, you can watch as workers seismically retrofit the underside of the building, a gigantic task that will make the building safe for earthquakes. This is the first opening day since the pandemic began, where members of the public and lobbyists are allowed in the building. The place had a feeling of excitement. The first day is also a time when the House and Senate like to set expectations and lay out their agenda to the media and the public. At noon, we gathered in a small Senate conference room where Democratic leaders shared their priorities. They will work on creating more affordable housing and tackle problems surrounding homelessness and also law and order issues. Senator James Manning has been working on a plan for universal health care and will again push for that this session.
My bill, under the concept of universal health care, will actually save $1 billion a year. In addition to that, our current healthcare system, not everybody is covered. This universal healthcare system will cover everyone.
Senator Floyd Przansky, chair of the Public Safety and Justice Committee, said lawmakers will work to make the gun restrictions in Measure 114 something that are easy to implement and avoids getting tied up in the court. He also said lawmakers will try to adjust Measure 110, which decriminalized user amounts of all drugs. He wants to lower the limit for the amount of fentanyl a person can have before it's considered more than just a user amount. Basically, if you've got more than a certain number of pills, Measure 110 would not protect you from criminal charges.
We will be looking at what is the break point as to being something that would be for personal use quantity as to what isn't. As we know, fentanyl has unfortunately shown its ugliness as to the strength and potency of it. And so you will probably see something that seems to be in size maybe smaller in personal use than what you would for someone else, just because of the ramifications.
This opening day did not run perfectly. As the Senate Democrats were beginning their meeting, something unexpected happened.
Hey, welcome. Thank you so much. Before I even introduce myself, I'm going to throw it over to Senate President Rob Wagner to make a few introductory remarks.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. Greetings, good afternoon, everyone, or good late morning.
Recording stopped.
A minor glitch quickly fixed. It was also clear that the Democratic senators who once again control the Senate had been reminded to say they look forward to working with their Republican counterparts.
In the face of these difficulties, our state government should be solving problems for you and every Oregonian. But we do have to do it together. These challenges aren't Democratic or Republican challenges. They impact all of us. And it will require all of us, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, working together to fix them. We know that there are far more that unites us than divides us.
I look forward to pursuing these priorities with bipartisan collaboration across our chambers that will change families' lives for the better.
I look forward to working with my Democratic colleagues and my colleagues across the aisle for an Oregon that works for everyone.
But when it was time for questions, a reporter for the Oregon Capitol Chronicle asked the perfect one. If there is so much love for the Republican counterparts, why were they not invited to sit at this table?
I think you're going to see a very clear tone that good ideas come from everywhere. And all of our committee chairs have already started the process of reaching out to their vice chairs every member of their committee and trying to identify areas, whether or not it's the issues that you see reflected here at this table. So many of these issues are representative across the state of Oregon, and I think there's a ton of area of alignment.
Meanwhile, over on the House side, Speaker of the House, Democrat Dan Rayfield, held a news conference with Republican leader Vicky Brees Iverson that sounded promising in terms of collaboration. They seemed downright chummy. Here they are answering a question about limiting the number of bills that can be entered during the session.
Within our caucus with Leader Fahey, we've been socializing as well within the Republican caucus, and we have not found unanimity yet to help limit those bills during a long session. And I'm hoping, Gary, that you can apply some pressure in this building to help us get there.
And if I might just piggyback onto that, as you apply the pressure, I suggest we start with committee bills, and then we work backwards from those. So that there is collaboration and room for us to move forward on this conversation. Committee bills.
So can we get an agreement that if we limit our committee bills, we can limit member bills?
I mean, it's a start.
We'll see. Fun and games down at the legislature. Last night, by the way, we ran an in-depth interview with Oregon's now former Senate President Peter Courtney. He was the longest-serving lawmaker in state history and did not run for re-election, so he's out. In fact, he's home now, raking leaves, trying to figure out what he's going to do next. He told me that yesterday. Many of you enjoyed our conversation and sent nice comments about Courtney. One called in to leave us a detailed message that also brought some context to what Courtney was talking about when he talked about the good old days, when lawmakers would gather at night after a day of feuding and have some drinks and relax together. We don't normally include first and last names when we run your comments, but we are for this one.
Hey, my name is Frankie Bell. I love the piece on Peter Courtney. It has so much more depth than you were able to cover. I've worked in the Capitol since the late 60s. Still working. I'm going to work this legislature as a House receptionist, partly because I'm addicted. But the other part is that the story on Courtney was so wonderful. I just wish that you could have taken it a little bit farther in that the camaraderie that he was talking about is why we got such good legislation. I have no statistics particularly, but at least legislators were having happy hour together and talking to each other. And now they're too busy. They don't seem to be able to do that. The ethics laws work against it. At any rate, it's a good story, and Peter Courtney saw it all.
Well, after hearing that, we just couldn't get enough. Frankie sounded amazing, and I really wanted to meet her. A former lawmaker told me she's a legend in the Capitol. So I decided to try and track her down today. And sure enough, I found her on the second floor of the Oregon House in Salem. Ladies and gentlemen, Frankie Bell. Frankie is 85 years old. She's worked in the legislature since 1967. Those were the final years of Governor Tom McCall. Over the last 57 years, she's seen a lot of what happens behind the scenes and has a lot of wisdom when it comes to what works and what does not. I really hope lawmakers are smart enough to listen to her memories of how things used to be.
The mechanism for getting together in the old days was, the good old days, was just that they socialized together after work. They don't do that anymore because of the ethic laws. They're afraid of I guess, corruption. I don't know exactly what they're afraid of, but for that is a definite lack. I've seen the whole process change over the years because of that. They need to talk to each other in an informal setting, whether it is at a dinner or a party. It really helps.
Frankie witnessed a fundamental truth about us humans. It's harder to demonize someone you know, someone who has the same hobby or likes the same sort of music or food or sports that you do, someone who laughed at your joke over cards the night before. Those are all reminders that we are all more alike than different, and that bond helps when making hard decisions on things like policy that will impact everyone in Oregon.
In the 70s, when we passed all that landmark legislation, the Bottle Bill, the Beach Bill, the urban growth, all of that, land use planning, which is what you're talking about, and that was with a Republican majority. Republican House, Republican Governor Tom McCall. The Senate was a coalition, a conservative coalition. Democrats were in the majority. But we passed all that landmark legislation. And I think it was because everybody got together after work and actually talked to each other.
She's got really good wisdom there. It's been a while since the two political parties passed such generational laws and plans for Oregon. Maybe it's time, maybe it's past time, the two sides create something that regularly puts them together outside of work, like they did in the old days.
Whether they agreed or disagreed. And they were friends. I think they're friends now, they just don't get to talk to each other. There's just not a setting in which they get together regularly. They go to caucus, their own caucus, they get that point of view, then they don't get to talk to each other in any other setting. Perhaps when on the floor of the House, as they are just now starting to go.
And as it turns out, Frankie told me there's some sort of mixer or party going on tonight in Salem for lawmakers, but she said it's the only one of the entire year. That should change. And that brings us to a very simple question that some of you will have to answer to, while others maybe not so sure. Ready? Who are your state legislators? Who represents you in Salem, both in the House of Representatives and the Senate? Do you know the answer? We often talk about our congressional reps and senators in Washington. Their names are pretty familiar: Wyden, Merkley, Bonamici, Bentz, Blumenauer, Chavez DeRemer, and Salinas. But what about here in state government? Without having to Google it, don't Google it yet, email us your answer right now. Who are your state lawmakers? And I have to tell you, I don't think I could tell you mine. Send your answers to thestory@kgw.com or call and leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090. It's okay if you don't know the answer. If that's the case, just say so. We're going to use some of your feedback on this story tomorrow. Up next on The Story, Measure 114. The gun reform measure passed by voters is still on hold, but there's new action from the Attorney General's office to try and get it implemented. Their request to the state Supreme Court and what it means for the future. Plus, state police finally respond to our question: how many guns have been sold under a loophole that Measure 114 looks to close? When The Story returns. Turning now to Measure 114, Oregon's voter-approved gun reform measure that was paused by a state judge before part of it even started. Tonight, that measure is still on hold, but there are some behind-the-scenes developments that happened late Friday that could decide the next steps. The state attorney general's office has petitioned the Oregon Supreme Court to overturn the Harney County judge's ruling that stopped Measure 114 from taking effect. They're basically saying, come on, you guys, toss this thing out. In a 69-page request, the AG's office says if the court won't throw out Judge Robert Racio's rulings, it should make Racio explain why the court should maintain his rulings. In other words, make him argue to you, the Supremes, why his ruling makes sense and should stand. And here's the long and short of it. The state Supreme Court will either accept or deny this petition from the AG's office. If they deny it, the case will stay as it is right now, paused for an undetermined amount of time until the judge rules on the constitutionality of each part. And that could take months, and in theory, it could even take years. But if the state's high court accepts this petition, there are only two options. They'll either decide if they should throw out Racio's ruling on 114, or they'll make him explain why they should uphold his rulings. It's worth noting that this isn't the state Supreme Court's first run-in with Measure 114. Early on in this process last month, the High Court rejected an effort from the Attorney General's office. They'd asked the court to block what was then a temporary restraining order against 114 issued by the same judge. 114 is not a new issue for the state Supreme Court, but the court is new when it comes to reviewing 114. In the last month, there's a new Chief Justice following the departure of Martha Walters. In addition to that, there are two new associate judges sworn in earlier this month. So we'll have to see if that new makeup of the court changes anything in the way that they rule on this Measure 114 question. Now, let's dig a little bit deeper into the petition from the AG's office. The state is arguing that the will of the people is being thwarted by the pause and that the Supremes need to fix that. 114 passed in November with 50.7% of the vote. So, yeah, legally, it is safe to call that the will of the people, I guess, but it's more like the will of just barely over half the people who voted for the measure. Anyway, if allowed to go into law, Measure 114 requires you to get a permit before you can buy a gun. It requires a background check is completed before a gun can be released to you. And it restricts the sale, manufacture, and use of magazines that hold more than 10 rounds of ammo. Now remember, this case we're talking about, this one that has 114 on hold right now, it's not about the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. No, instead, it's hinged on Article 1, Section 27 of the Oregon Constitution, which establishes a right to bear arms. And when it comes to magazines that hold 10 or more rounds, Judge Racio has ruled those magazines are not distinct from arms and are therefore protected by the state constitution. But in this legal filing, legal filing by the Attorney General's office, the lawyers argue that Racio made fundamental legal errors and acted beyond his discretion. They insist that Article 1, Section 27 of the state constitution protects the right to bear arms commonly used by Oregonians for self-defense way back in 1859 and earlier, and they write that does not apply to magazines that hold 10 rounds or more. The AG's office went on to argue that, at a minimum, the state Supreme Court should allow the high-capacity magazine ban to be implemented, as well as allow the parts of 114 that require background checks to be completed before a gun is released to a buyer. Did you know right now, if you buy a gun and your background check takes longer than 3 business days, the dealer can legally give you that gun? 114 would close that loophole, but it's not being closed while it's paused. By the way, we've been asking the state police how many guns have been released through this loophole since the election. They took a while to get back to us, and then they told us, yeah, no clue. They don't keep track. They don't know. So there's that. The Attorney General's petition goes on to talk about other mass shootings around the U.S., the California synagogue shooting, the Charleston church shooting, and the shooting at the Safeway in Bend back in August. The shooter there had 4 legally purchased 30-round magazines. He sprayed more than 100 rounds into the store, ultimately killing 2 people. The petition reads, the longer that the trial court's injunctive orders remain in effect for the months or years in which the case is pending in that court, the greater the possibility of another comparable tragedy happening here in Oregon. These dangers are real, they write, and Measure 114 reasonably seeks to safeguard against them. Okay, so where are we at here? We're waiting for the Oregon Supreme Court to say whether it will take up that petition or not. And in the meantime, the folks who want to block 114 to keep that in place, well, they're likely going to file their answer to the Attorney General's arguments on January 27th, maybe a little bit earlier. So where we're at is we're back to a Measure 114 waiting game. Nothing has changed about gun laws in Oregon since the election, and we have to wait to see how things play out in the judicial branch. We will keep you posted on whatever happens next. Up next here on The Story, we're heading to Washington County for an update on a deputy who was seriously injured there after being T-boned by a driver under the influence.
I don't know how I'm alive. Like, I've been at hundreds of those crashes and I don't know how I'm alive.
We will bring you recordings from dispatchers and other deputies from that night and the reason Deputy Mike Trotter refused to give up when those thoughts were creeping into his mind in the hospital. That's when The Story returns. Welcome back. Tonight we're getting a look into the life of a Washington County deputy who was badly hurt in a crash last April. Deputy Mike Trotter was T-boned in his patrol SUV by a sedan that ran a red light. 5 teenagers were inside that sedan. 2 were killed and the driver is charged with DUI and manslaughter. Even though Deputy Trotter survived, his life will never be the same. And despite it all, he's still trying to work his way back onto the force. Devin Haskin has his story.
Can I get a large vanilla chai?
Even something as simple as standing, waiting for his drink to be made, is painful.
Okay, thank you.
For Mike Trotter.
Coming to this coffee shop is about as far as I can get by myself.
He's limited in mobility after what had been
just any other routine day on Graveyard.
Around 12:24 in the morning on April 27th of 2022. Deputy Trotter was on his way to help assist with a call about a possible drunk driver.
And I remember one of our K-9 handlers getting on the radio.
576. That ATL just tried to go head on with me almost. I'm going to have it southbound Murray.
And then that's the last thing I remember.
A Nissan Altima filled with 5 teenagers coming from the north heading south on Murray at the same time as Trotter was heading east on TV Highway. Trotter says he was told that Nissan Altima was going around 100 miles an hour when it hit him right on his driver's side of his SUV.
Code 3 medical, he just crashed into our deputy.
Trotter was pinned inside his vehicle, bleeding.
We got one deputy, he's conscious, alert, also heavily pinned.
Inside the other car, 5 teenagers from Beaverton's Southridge High School.
5417 got 2, a trap. They're pinned heavily. Right in the front seat, there's also 3 in the back.
17-year-old Matthew Amaya and 16-year-old Juan Aguilera died. The 3 other teens, including the driver, 18-year-old Xavier Rodriguez, were critically injured. Rodriguez was charged with manslaughter, assault, and DUI.
Like, I've been at hundreds of those crashes, and I don't know how I'm alive.
Trotter remembers waking up in the hospital a week or 2 later after the accident. He knew that his life had changed. He says he thought of giving up, but what kept him going was his 3-year-old son, Harley.
I remember at one point telling myself, like, it would just be so much easier to die right now. Like, this sucks, but I wouldn't do it because it wouldn't be fair for him.
Almost 6 weeks later, he was moved from the hospital to a rehab center and finally went home around the beginning of July.
Oh, you want to stay here, buddy?
His days now are anything but routine.
Yeah.
They're filled with physical therapy and doctor's appointments.
So I broke both bones of my right arm. My pelvis was on the left side was just completely shattered, and due to that injury, I have a bunch of damage to my sciatic nerve on the left side.
And muscles in his left leg that don't work.
I'm in such excruciating pain, it's not even that enjoyable.
He says doctors have told him his career as a law enforcement officer is likely over.
I still can't do a full thumbs up.
But he's working each day to prove them wrong.
It's better than it was.
What has kept him going and helped him get stronger?
Yeah, about to be 4, end of this month.
Are his family.
Trotter's working to finish his associate's degree so he can have a backup plan for what's next. He says the sheriff's office has been more than gracious and accommodating, and he says they're trying to find a position for him that he can work in given his current limitations. I'm Devin Haskins, KGW News.
Thanks, Devin. Wow. All right, keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@khw.com. We're going to wrap things up right after this. We asked how many of you know your state lawmakers. I've seen the emails coming in. I'm very impressed. We have a well tuned in, very sharp political audience out there. Thanks, you guys. And you're right. You are really doing a good thing knowing who your lawmakers are, because you can influence them and they can make a difference in your lives. So good on you. I'm going to study mine. That's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow night.